Hey, book buddy friends, I am so excited and sad at the same time because we have come to the end of our adventure in Will of the Wood. Today will be our final reading with you guys. So I have gotten my book back out again. I have turned to chapter 72, and in my copy, it starts on page 361, and I'm excited to find out how Willa's adventure ends. As the hours passed, the smoky haze of midnight flames slowly gave way to the coming dawn, with Venus, the morning star, rising from the black silhouettes of the mountain ridges up into the dark blue of the glowing sky. As the sun began to rise from behind the great mountain, Willa's thoughts turned to the humans. She just hoped that in all the chaos and violence of the night, none of the guards or jailers had found Cassius, Beatrice, or any of the other children as they fled through the forest and down the mountain. Keep running, she thought to her young dayfolk friends, keep running all the way home. And then she thought about the last of the 3 human children to escape through the hole. Follow the east side of the creek and look for a small cave in the rocks, she had told Willa. Stay quiet and hidden until morning. She didn't know what she was going to do in the world now that the lair had been destroyed or where she was going to go. But she wanted to finish the one thing she had begun, to make sure that Nathaniel's children made it home. She followed the creek towards the spot she had told them to hide. As she approached the area, her mind clouded with dark thoughts she couldn't control. She'd seen so much fighting and death. What if the children never made it to the hiding spot? What if they had been attacked or recaptured? When she saw Willa crouched near the crevice in the rocks, Willa's chest flooded with relief. She's there, Willa thought. She made it. Willa had light brown skin and beautiful chestnut eyes, which made a striking combination as she stared out from the rocks, scanning the forest for danger. Her long, straight black hair fell evenly on either side of her face, and her mouth was set in a serious expression. Her plain brown dress was dirty from weeks of imprisonment and the trek down into the gully of the creek, and it was torn where she had used it to make a bandage for Willa's neck, but Willa looked strong and capable. Willa moved forward through the broken tumble of giant rocks until she was no more than a few steps from Willa. Then she slowly revealed herself, trying not to startle her. Willa's face immediately lit up. "You made it," she said as she moved towards her. It startled Willa when Willa wrapped her arms around her and pulled her close. Willa couldn't help but smile. Willa was probably her same age, but taller and stronger than her, and there was something invigorating about her embrace. It was a strange and glorious feeling, to be held by this bold, human girl, to feel the arms of her friendship around her. "Thank you for saving me and my brothers," Willa said. "You're welcome," Willa said happily. When they separated, Willa looked Willa over more closely, checking the bandage on her neck. "The cut?" Willa said in astonishment. "And your other wounds? They're almost healed." "I got a little help from an old friend," Willa said. "You came back," Iska said enthusiastically as he crawled out of the cave, holding his little brother by the hand. "Shh, we're supposed to be hiding," Willa scolded him. "It's all right now," Iska insisted. "Willa's here. She'll protect us." "I don't know if I can protect anyone," Willa started to say, but following his sister's lead, Iska leapt at Willa and embraced her, wrapping both his arms around her. "During the night, we decided we weren't going to leave this cave until you got here." Willa frowned and looked at him. "I told you that we wouldn't see each other again, that you should go home without me," she said in confusion. "We saw the flames during the night," Iska said. "We knew something bad happened." "We were worried about you," Willa said. "I knew she'd make it," Iska said proudly and defiantly. "No, you didn't," Willa contradicted him. "You were fretting about her all night. We all were. Even Ollie was asking about you." Willa was glad to see her friends were all right, and she was happy to see their smiling faces, but she knew they had a long way to go before they were home. And she also knew that it was those same smiling faces that were going to change everything when the three children came back into their father's life. She felt as if her time with Nathaniel had been as rare and ethereal as the soft glow of the blue ghost fireflies on a long dark night. But his reunion with his real children would be like the rise of the sun. The faint magic that had warmed Nathaniel's wounded heart for a little while would fade into nothingness in the brightness of the coming day. And she knew that with his children sleeping at night down the hall once more, the man Nathaniel would no longer have a need for a strange night spirit creature to be hanging in a woven cocoon from the ceiling in his room. She knew all of this, and it filled her with a wilting sadness. But she tried to stay strong in her heart, clinging to the idea that she had this one good thing in her life. "I'll tell you the way home from here," Willa said. "The journey is long and difficult, but just keep following this creek until it meets the river, and then follow the river down into the valley." "But we don't know the way," Iska said with a sudden firmness that surprised her. "If you follow the river, you won't get lost," Willa said. She knew she couldn't go with them. The pain would be too great. It was their home, not hers. The man Nathaniel was their father, not her father. She knew she couldn't bear to see them together as a family as she had once been with Nathaniel, and she couldn't bear to say goodbye to him again. "But what if someone attacks us along the way?" Halia said, seeming to join in with her brother's sudden and bewildering stubbornness. "The night spirits have been scattered," Willa said. "I don't think any of the guards and jailers will be coming down here." "But they might," Iska said. "They might be scouring the river looking for easy prey. They might be very angry about what happened last night and want revenge on any human they find," Talia joined in. "If they find us, they'll kill us," Scope insisted, nodding his head vigorously. "You've got to come with us, Willa." "I'm sorry, Iska, I can't," Willa said. The expression on Iska's face dropped in disappointment. "Why not?" he asked, his voice shaking with emotion. "Your father has been missing all of you terribly," she began uncertainly, looking at Iska, Halia, and Anali. "But when he sees the three of you—" Her words dwindled off. She knew she didn't have an answer that she could explain to them, but as they all stared at her with their determined eyes, she could see they weren't going to give up. "All right," she said finally. "I'll take you down the river into the valley. I'll get you home, and then we'll say goodbye." It would have normally been a 4-hour journey down into the valley, moving along the narrow edge of the river and climbing over the larger rocks. But with 3 humans, it took much longer. Despite his initial enthusiasm, Iska struggled to keep up. And although Halia did not complain about carrying Anali mile after mile, Willa could see the girl was struggling. "I'll take him," Willa said, gathering Anali into her arms, and the little human clung to her like a baby possum to his mama's fur. When she moved too fast or leapt to a particular distant rock, Anali gripped her extra tight and whispered, "Don't let me go," in her ear. The children made too much noise when they traveled. They talked loud, they walked loud, they breathed loud, and their monotone skin stuck out so conspicuously in the forest that it was a wonder that this species had ever survived their journeys through the world. She was sure that every predator in the area was going to hear their heavy, tromping feet and see their bright faces and arms. But on the other side of it, she liked how, as soon as she took Anali into her arms, Halia began helping Iska up the steeper climbs, and sometimes Iska helped her in return, brother and sister making their way home. Humans weren't always born as twins like Farron were, but their bond was there. She could see it. As they traveled home, they came upon a pack of jaders with sharpened spears scavenging along the bank of the river. Willa ducked down behind a rock with Anali and pulled Iska towards her. "Shh," she whispered to Anali, touching her lips with her finger. Halia quickly pinned herself behind a pine tree. Smart girl, Willa thought. She's learning quick. Another time they saw a group of 6 loggers with axes and picks trudging along a path through the forest. "Just keep walking," Willa told the men in her mind, as she and the children hunkered down in the bushes beside the trail. Working together over the next few hours, they hid and they snuck, and they ran and they climbed until the spruce and firs of the mountain slopes began to give way to the leafy trees of the valley. Finally, she and the 3 children came to the pools of reflecting water that lay in the stones along the bank of the river. Willa remembered looking into these pools and seeing her face turn to stars on the night she was shot. "We're here," she said softly to the others, not quite able to keep the sadness from creeping into her voice. "She's right. This is our part of the river," Iska said excitedly, seeming not to notice her solemn tone. "These are our rocks. We're almost home." As he said these words, Willa's heart filled with a slow and quiet sorrow. She knew she would soon be parting from her companions and on her own again. They approached the house from the same direction Willa had the first night she had come to fill her satchel. She remembered worrying about the possibility of a vicious dog and violent men with killing sticks, and she remembered studying the dayfolk lair made from murdered trees and stones broken from the bones of the river. It felt so different now. Other than the den she had shared with her mama, this was the only place where she had ever felt like she belonged. She knew she shouldn't approach the house. She knew that it was going to hurt, but she kept walking, Iska on one side and Halia on the other, and Anali in her arms. The house came into view. She just wanted to get one last glimpse of the man named Nathaniel, and then she would go. But as she scanned the house and the barn and the mill, she did not see him. He didn't appear to be outside, and the house looked quiet and still. Too quiet and too still. The empty porch, the closed doors, the shut-up windows, the dark rooms. There was something about it that made her certain that the house was empty and that he wasn't just gone. He was gone for good. Iska and Halia didn't seem to notice any of this. Willa set Anali down, then the 3 children ran together happily and noisily across the grass, up the steps, and banged through the front door into the house. Willa watched and listened. "He's not here," Iska said as he ran through the house, looking in the kitchen and the other rooms. "He's gone," Halia said, her voice filled with confusion and disappointment. As Willa stepped through the front door into the main room of the house, she glanced at the spot where Nathaniel kept his rifle. The rifle was gone, along with the knapsack he used for long journeys. Iska dashed up the stairs from room to room and then called down to them. "He's not up here either. It looks like he's taken his clothes." Willa looked at the mantel over the fireplace. The photograph of the family that had been there was gone. He hadn't just gone hunting, and he hadn't gone into town for supplies. He had left for good. "Why did he leave?" Halia said, her voice on the edge of breaking. Willa shook her head. "This can't be," she thought. "He can't be gone. I can still smell him." "Where did he go?" Iska asked. "He hasn't been gone long," Willa said. "I think we just missed him." "We need to go after him," Halia said. Willa could tell that she was exhausted, but she wasn't going to give up. "But we don't even know which way he went," Iska cried in despair. Willa knew that it wasn't like him to lose hope, but the disappearance of his father, after all this time, was more than he could bear. "Don't worry," Willa said, touching his arm. "He can't have gotten far. There's one place I know he'll stop before he leaves here. We'll pick up his scent there and track him. And don't worry, he leaves big footprints." Willa led them outside and across the grass of the front yard. Halia walked stoically beside her, carrying Anali in her arms. But Willa could tell by her quietness and the stern look on her face that she was worried. She was the older sister, the protector, the one who knew what to do, but she was seconds from tears. And they walked through the sourwood trees and entered the meadow. Willa saw Nathaniel at the far end. He was standing over the graves, his gun and his knapsack slung over his shoulder, his head hanging low, saying his last prayers and his last goodbye. It appeared he was leaving what was once his life and setting out on a new journey, perhaps never to return. There had been too much loss here, too much pain. He had given up hope, and now he was going to leave the world, the mountains, the forest, all that he had once loved. "Papa!" Iska shouted as he ran towards his father. Halia ran quickly behind him, still carrying her little brother. Hearing Iska's shouts, Nathaniel closed his eyes very hard, as if he could not believe what he was hearing. It was as if he thought his mind was playing cruel tricks on him. He clenched his eyes shut, blocking out the pain. But as Iska ran towards him and kept shouting, Nathaniel finally opened his eyes and turned. A look of shock covered his face. His face shifted as if he wouldn't allow himself to believe what he was seeing. He was standing on the graves of his children, but his children were running towards him. And then, all at once, he seemed to give way. Nathaniel set down his rifle and supplies and fell to his knees as his children dove into his arms, shouting and talking and carrying on. He wrapped himself around them and pulled them close. The children were ragged, dirty, scratched, and bruised, but they were here and they were full of joy. The man Nathaniel began to sob with tears of relief and gratitude. He held his children tight as he cried and kissed them quickly and repeatedly, one after another, cupping their faces in his hands and looking at them, then pulling them close again. "You're alive, I can't believe it," he was muttering. "Thank God you're alive." Iska talked rapidly and excitedly, telling his father about everything they'd been through, how he was captured, how he had survived in the prison, how Willa had fed him cookies, and how they had worked together to escape. The stoic Halia didn't say a word at first, but as soon as her father looked at her and gently asked how she was doing, she broke down and wept in his arms. Through all of this, Willa remained standing where she was, in the forest at the edge of the meadow, very still, her eyes watching it all, her heart beating hard in her chest. She did not step into the meadow. The meadow was not hers anymore. The meadow was Nathaniel's and his family's. It was the resting place of family lost and the embraces of family found, but it was not hers. She looked up at the great mountain with the mist clearing from the rounded peak. The mountain knew. The mountain had been watching all along, and it was still watching, still with her, and the mountain knew. As she turned and looked at the mountains again, she saw that Nathaniel finally had what he had most wanted in the world. He had finally found his children. She breathed in long, slow, deep breaths, ragged and unsteady, waves of emotion pouring through her, churning up inside her. But as she watched them, she couldn't help but feel something building inside her. Just seeing them together filled her with such happiness and joy. She felt a great swelling in her heart, almost a sense of pride, a sense that she had done something worthwhile. And that was all she could cling to, that she had done what she had set out to do. Finally, she turned and walked away, silent and invisible, into the forest in the same way she had come. And she walked back to the river. She said goodbye to everyone in her mind. She said goodbye to Gretick and to the other Jaders and the survivors of her clan who would find a new way without her. She said goodbye to her mother and her father who had passed away so long ago. She said goodbye to her twin sister, Alua, she'd played with as a child and lived now in the ancient stone of the Dead Hollow. She said goodbye to her mama, who had given her all that she had become and all that she would ever be, who had nurtured her and cared for her from a seed into a tree. She said goodbye to the boy Iska, who had spoken to her through the door of his prison cell, and his little brother Anali, she had carried in her arms, and his bold sister Halia, who had led her brothers down through the valley during the night to their hiding spot in the cave beside the river. And wiping tears from her eyes as she walked away, she said goodbye to the man Nathaniel, who, on a frightened night, after losing everything he cared for, had shown her a single moment of kindness and started it all. Suddenly, a large hand gripped her shoulder and turned her around quite forcefully. Startled, Willa looked up to see Nathaniel's bright blue eyes staring down at her. He and his 3 children surrounded her, all looking at her. "Where do you think you're going?" Nathaniel asked. She stuttered. "How is all this possible, Willa?" he demanded in amazement. "How did you do all this?" Willa thought about how, and then when, and the why she had done what she had done. Then she looked up at Nathaniel and just said, I just wanted to do one kind thing. As Nathaniel looked at her, his brows furrowed, his eyes narrowed, and he pursed his lips as if he was struggling to understand. But where are you going now? He asked, his voice filled with sadness. I don't know, she said softly. Nathaniel shook his head as if he was frustrated with her answer. He knelt down on one knee in front of her, held her gently by the shoulders, and looked into her eyes. Do you understand what happened, Willa? You just vanished after the loggers attacked, and you just left. I thought you had gone for good. I thought you left me. I couldn't stand it anymore. There was nothing left for me but memories and pain. Willa listened to his story in shock. She could hear the strain in his voice. She had no idea what he had been going through since she had left. But now, Nathaniel continued, his voice softening, with the children back and with you, Willa. Please don't leave. You're part of my family. I love you. We all love you, Iska said, touching her shoulder. Stay with us, Halia said, grasping her hand. You can sleep in my room if you want. Or you can sleep in the tree if you want. You can sleep wherever you want to, Nathaniel said. It doesn't matter. Just stay. Too stunned to talk, Willa gazed around at their expectant faces. Was this actually happening? Or had she fallen asleep under the log after being scorned by her clan, and all this was a dream? She had always thought of love as the rarest and most delicate of things, and that there must be a limit to the amount of love that a human or a fairy could give or feel, a limit to how much love there could be in the world. She had thought about once the man Nathaniel had reunited with his real children, there would be no place for her. But love wasn't the stone. It was the river. Love was like the glistening stars in the midnight sky, like the sun that always rises and the water that always flows. A part of her deep down inside feared that the more she loved the day folk, the less she would love the forest, that her memory of her forest ways would fade and her powers dwindle. But here with Nathaniel and his children, it didn't feel as if her world was diminishing. It felt as if it was expanding, growing, changing. Love was infinite in so many ways. It felt as if she could keep opening her heart to the magic in the world, and the magic in the world would keep filling it. The only way she could live and grow into the girl her mama worked so hard for her to become was with the nutrients of a family's earth and the warmth of a family's sunlight. Finally, unable to find the words she needed in a language that they could understand, she slowly leaned forward and put her head against Nathaniel's chest. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wrapped her arms around him. The three children cheered and hollered, for they knew what it meant, and Nathaniel whispered, "This is your home now, Willa." Move without a sound, still without a trace, Willa thought, remembering what she'd been thinking that first night she crept up towards the house. I think I may have stolen your hearts, Willa said, and you've stolen mine. The end. What a great adventure in Willa of the Wood. I have enjoyed reading with you all and hope you have enjoyed the journey as well. I hope to meet again. Until then, we'll see you soon.